Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening.
Trains were shut down. People were stranded. The fear that they must have experienced when this occurred, I cannot imagine.
We will not relent. We will stand by the sides of everybody who's been impacted by this in New Jersey until we get back.
Ida killing more than 24 people as it ripped through the Northeast. Historic flooding and tornadoes ravaging New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. More than 100 water rescues in Philadelphia today alone. So why weren't we ready for it? And a major blow to Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court declining to block Texas's restrictive abortion law. So what does this mean for women across the United States?
So when you found out Broadway was coming back, what was the first thing you thought?
Of course, just thrilled, because that meant that not only me, but the people I cared about would have a job again.
Break out the jazz hands. Broadway is back. More than a dozen shows reopening this month. NBC News Now anchor Joe Fryer takes us behind the curtain. We start tonight with team coverage of Ida. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman has the latest forecast. MSNBC anchor Yasmin Vasugian is in Mamaroneck, that's in Westchester County, New York, where she has been checking out the flooding and the damage all day long. Yasmin, I have been watching you since early this morning. What you're seeing there is just incredible. For folks who aren't familiar, about a half hour north of New York on a good day, which is definitely not today. Tell us more about what you're seeing there and what folks are going through.
You talk about actually getting out here. It wasn't one of those good days, not because there was traffic. There actually wasn't a lot of traffic getting out here earlier this morning because people were advised to stay at home, especially folks that were leaving New York City by the mayor. That being said, there were a lot of road closures, even getting around and navigating the city because there was just so much flooding. You had to get around the area. So it took us a bit longer to get out here. But let me kind of show you what's going on here. So first of all, this is good news behind me, right? If you don't know, now you know. Con Edison, right? The electric company out here. So folks don't have power. Obviously, you see this truck show up, you get a little happy because maybe possibly that power is going to get turned back on pretty soon. Let me show you this house right in front of me here, right? So these guys actually have dealt with a lot of flooding over the last couple of years, and they decided to put their house up on stilts so that they wouldn't necessarily deal with the flooding when major storms came in like the one that they'd had last night. They said even with the house now elevated,
oh my gosh,
the water came all the way up to that 918 sign.
No,
if you can believe it. They had to clear out their entire basement. Yeah, absolutely. They had to clear out their entire basement, and obviously you see a lot of their belongings here in the street, and they had a team of their family here helping out, kids, aunts, uncles, everybody was here helping that effort out. Now look at this house. So these guys were not so lucky, and I want to go inside. I'm just coming around this way. JP, don't trip because it's a little bit tough to navigate this area, but JP's going to roll with me, and just bear with me, guys, for a moment, Allison.
No, JP has been doing an amazing job today covering this.
Yeah, I know. Everybody knows who JP is now by the end of the day.
We sure do.
So it's a community effort, and I've been saying this all day as well. These are the next-door neighbors and family of the next-door neighbors of this home on stilts. They're helping Andrina clear out her house because her house was completely flooded. This house, obviously, is a lot lower than that house across the street, so the water came all the way in. I do want to be able to go inside. Guys, could we just sneak in? Do you mind? Okay. Come on in. I mean, take a look at this. It was completely destroyed in here. I mean, they're rolling up the carpet here, obviously, because that's done. There was a couch here. That's done. The appliance is done. That's the washing machine. And this is the nice lady that lives across the street who put her home on stilts. And because you guys had experienced so much flooding, you said we had to change something.
Right. We went through this many times, more than a half dozen times.
Yeah.
So we applied for a grant through FEMA, and we paid a third, and FEMA paid 2/3, and they raised our house 12 feet.
And the water almost still got into that?
The water was like 6 inches from our dwelling.
Wow. Yeah. You can't put that house any higher.
We cannot. No.
And then this, let me let Andrina do her job and get her carpet out of there, and then we're going to talk to her in just a moment. But while she does that, I just want to show you a little bit of what's going on in this house because it's just incredible to see. I don't know, for folks out there that have not been in a flood, and a lot of us have at this point, if you live in the United States of America, but I mean, the smell is just, you can just kind of smell the condensation.
Yeah.
Having to come back into your home and see the devastation here. Andrina, can I grab you for one moment? Sure. I know you said you didn't want to be sweaty, but it is what it is. You said to me yesterday you had a feeling something bad was going to go down, so you left.
I did, because the fire department came by to take our contact information in case of emergencies. And then 2 separate reporters came by. I said, why is everyone coming here? So I decided to just pack up and go.
What time was that at yesterday?
I think we left around 3:30.
Wow.
So before it started raining.
And do you have kids?
I have a son, an 8-year-old.
And so you left with your 8-year-old?
I did.
And where did you guys go?
I have a friend in New Rochelle, so we went and we stayed by her for the night.
And when did you come back to your home?
I got back here around 1:30.
And how are you feeling seeing this?
So I'm overwhelmed. I think I just sat on the front steps for a little bit, sat in the car, and I couldn't do anything. It was just overwhelming. So I tried walking through the house, can't even get into some of the rooms so far. But it was just overwhelming. So now I have people helping me. It feels like step by step, maybe I can figure stuff out. But at first, it's just you don't know what to do.
It's emotional.
There's been a lot of crying, yes.
So now what? Have you thought about what's next?
Moving.
Moving? You're going to leave or move for a temporary time until you can get it fixed
I
up?
definitely have to move for a temporary time, but I'm looking at possibly just finding somewhere else. It's flooded before, but always just in the crawl space. It's never come up here before, and I've lived here almost 6 years. So this just feels like a lot. I can't do this again, so.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Andrina, I wish you the best of luck. You're so lucky that you have the community around you to help you out, giving you water in times of need. Thank you so much. We wish you the best of luck. I mean, and you can just see, Allison, like the water. A lot of places that we've been seeing is the water line, but here you see the water line right here.
Oh my
gosh. You kind of faintly see it. That's how high the water came up. So literally overtaking the entire. I mean, you could swim through the living room if you had been here in the middle of the night, right?
Thank God
Let's
they
go
left.
back outside. Let these guys get back to work. Exactly. Thank God they left. That's a really good thing to say. I've been seeing this. I mean, you've been seeing, you said that you've been seeing the coverage all day, and I've been seeing this throughout all of the Mamaroneck. It's troubling. You go to bed at night and, for a lot of these folks that didn't have the sense to leave like Andrina, and you think it's going to be okay. The rain is light, and then suddenly an hour or 2 hours later, suddenly the rain is, up to your neck. And a lot of folks are, kind of recounting that experience to me. And that's why we're seeing so much devastation here. But little by little, I guess they're kind of taking it in and figuring out what's next for them.
Yasmin, I hate to call this a happy ending, but I mean, we've been talking about there are dozens of people who didn't leave, who didn't know how bad it was going to be. And a lot of them died in their very own basements. I mean, I know it's devastating to come back and see your home look like this. Andrina's beautiful home. It's just heartbreaking that they've been there for 6 years and this is what they're going through. But my gosh, she and her 8-year-old are alive.
I know. I mean, I think the numbers that we are seeing now, and each and every single one of those numbers are individuals ranging in age from 2 years old. Someone as young as 2 years old lost their life yesterday because of this devastating flooding and rain. That was in New York City. I think across the tri-state area between New York and New Jersey, some of the numbers that we're seeing are up to 27 people have died so far. We're hearing of one more fatality as well, I believe, in Connecticut. And correct me if I'm wrong on that. So, yes, Connecticut as well. But again, I mean, the discoveries are still happening.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a state trooper in Connecticut, and that was an additional discovery made just a couple of hours ago. So the cleanup is still happening. The discoveries are still happening. People have lost their lives. And it's happening a lot, as you mentioned, in those basement apartments, especially in New York City. If you haven't been in New York City, I mean, there's a lot of brownstones in New York City. A lot of folks live in the basement, and then there's the first floor and the second floor. If you're thinking about the water coming up 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 feet high, that entire basement apartment is going to be flooded. If you decide to stay in your apartment and you didn't necessarily know to leave, you could find yourself in a hairy situation as those folks did, and I'm just devastated to know that those family members are now without their loved ones.
Yeah. Yasmin, just before I let you go, to put this in perspective for people, I'm a New Yorker, you're a New Yorker. We used to not see this. I know folks in Mamaroneck are telling you they've been through it so many times they raised their houses, but you go back 15, maybe 20 years, we didn't have this kind of flooding. We're talking about tornadoes in the Northeast. These things are not that common, and it sure feels like they're becoming more and more so. And I know several of the local leaders, whether it's in New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut, we're talking about that today and how this could potentially be our new reality.
It's one of the first times that I've been covering a storm, because I was, on the ground covering Sandy.
Yep.
And it's one of the first times where the conversation of the storm has gone from, okay, here's the devastation, to this might be attributed to climate change.
Yeah.
Something is different, because these are the worst of the worst of the worst. Like, if you think about it, this time, this summer, we have had 3 really horrific rains in New York City alone, where you've seen subway systems filled up to the brim, right? overpouring onto the subway tracks. And so I think a lot of folks are having that conversation of, can our infrastructure sustain these really incredible weather events, right?
Yeah.
And how do we stop it? How do we change things? Governor Kathy Hochul, the new governor of New York, talked about that very thing. Here's what she had to say.
Because of climate change, unfortunately, this is something we're going to have to deal with great regularity, and we want to assure all New Yorkers that we're prepared for this, and we'll do everything we can in our power to protect human life and property.
And I will say this, you mentioned how in Mamaroneck they say they get a lot of flooding here. It's because these houses, they're on a river, so they get a lot of overflow from the river, and then comes the intense rain. But you also heard the one homeowner who's on the stilts talk about the fact that they raised it that high thinking, okay, we're safe now. But then yesterday, that water was almost getting into the living room as high as it was. And so I think a lot of legislators, lawmakers are going to have to answer for the fact that we have to change the infrastructure. Something needs to be done to ensure that folks are able to stay safe and secure their belongings in these really huge weather events.
Well, Yasmin, thanks to you. Thanks to JP, who we now know very well, for your compassionate coverage today. Listen, we could talk about flooding all day long, but it's the people who are going through it, the neighbors coming together.
By the way, Allison.
Yeah?
Allison, Kenny, my sound guy, needs a shout out as well. And he, by the way, he speaks Spanish, so he's helped me navigate a lot of the people in this community, too, to get the real story on with folks.
Kenny, a huge thanks to you as well. Yasmin hasn't been yelling your name as much because she's not worried about you tripping, but thanks to all of you. Your reporting and your coverage today has been compassionate and it's told the human stories, and that's really what this is all about. So thanks to you guys for all your hard work today. The Passaic River in New Jersey flooding, killing a person trapped in their car and forcing dozens of people from their homes. Passaic, New Jersey's Fire Chief Patrick Trenacost here now. Chief, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with us with all that you have going on today. We're so grateful for just a few minutes out of your day. I know your team's been working round the clock, nearly 24 hours straight. First, how are you doing? And what are the biggest problems that you've got on your plate in Passaic at this very moment?
Well, thank you for having us. We're going through like what every other town is going through. We have personnel that have been working over 24 hours. My staff is on 36 hours since we had a chance to put our head down and take a nap. What we're seeing is, I'm 35 years here, and I rode the storm out, and I was responding. The amount of rain, the fierce, I've never seen it before.
Yeah.
The way it filled our streets, our main Ave. See where we're located. We're located at the southernmost point of Passaic County, so we have river and tidal water, which we know how to deal with. This was the magnitude that we never had to deal with in a short period of time.
It's just unbelievable as we look at the images of streets that they look like the Passaic River. I mean, we know that that's what that water is, but my goodness, it looks like streets and rivers have merged into one. I know you had to evacuate some folks. Have any of them been able to get back home yet, or is the water still too high where you're just not able to even think about getting people back in their homes?
Well, fortunately, a lot of the water is receding. We're watching our high tide. We are located on tidal basin. So a lot of people have severe damage, as you've seen. Yeah. Mostly basements and first floors. So we closed our, we set up a temporary for our residents to come in and have a place to eat while we assess their areas, if the gas leaks, boilers, electrical panels. So we've been working throughout the night to get people back in. We also been dealing with some tragedy with the loss of a 70-year-old male victim. My personnel were able to go in 8 feet of water and rescue his wife and child. And I just came in off the river after 12 hours of searching for a 19-year-old male and a 21-year-old female victim.
Oh, I'm so sorry that is what you're dealing with. It's just awful to hear. You mentioned, and I just want to clarify, that you are a tidal basin and you're watching the high tide. When is high tide there? Are you still worried about more flooding coming in, or have you passed that point?
Well, our recent high tide, we were able to get through it. It was roughly about 3 foot high tide. It came in like 3:15. The night tides are usually more of concerning. We also have river from upstream, the water coming from upstream that we constantly are watching our eyes on, and it seems that the worst might be behind us. We are keeping our fingers crossed.
Chief, I hope it certainly is. Again, thank you. I know your crews have been working with very little rest, and you're really just trying to save lives and keep people safe there. Thank you so much, and I hope it just continues to improve.
Thank you. Be well.
You too.
I think we now understand that every attempt at projection, bluntly, is failing us. Let's be clear. We're getting from the very best experts projections that then are made a mockery of in a matter of minutes.
All right, let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman. I mean, Michelle, we heard the mayor say it there. The forecast didn't look nearly this bad, and it is certainly not because you are not expert forecasters. Can you just walk us through what happened last night to cause this mess and just try to explain to people what's going on meteorologically, what's going on in our world and our climate that's causing what we're seeing on the news today?
Hi there, Allison. Yeah, so I think this is such a big conversation. I appreciate the points. I appreciate the questions. I do believe, truly believe this is a well-advertised event. I know that we talked about it. Bill Cairns talked about it. The local weather service has talked about it. The local meteorologist talked about it. We talked about heavy rain moving through Tennessee and then into the mid-Atlantic. I even used the word dire 2 days ago. So I think there's two problems with this. I think that we knew how much rain was going to come through. We knew there was a severe weather threat, and it was a big one. So that was a second piece. I think what happens is the communication maybe is broken down possibly when you say 6 inches of rain. What does that mean on top of saturated grounds that are 200% over what is typically supposed to be with Henri and Fred and a super wet July and August? What does that mean? What does it translate in real life? And I think maybe that's where things get complicated. Does it mean something different along rivers where rivers are rising very, very quickly? Does it mean something along streams and creeks, or maybe in an urban setting where you have concrete and asphalt and it's not absorbing that 7 inches that are falling in a short amount of time? So I think there's so many factors to this. Do I think climate change has a correlation? 100%. Do I think we're seeing things we haven't seen before? For sure. Do I think it's going to become the norm? Of course. So I think there are a lot of factors that we need to learn as meteorologists. We need to learn as leaders of a community where maybe it's not translating to the numbers on the map. We need to know how that's going to translate in real life. So, Allison, I truly believe that this was advertised. I just want to give kudos to the National Weather Service in New York. In Mount Holly, I covered Mount Holly, Philadelphia this morning for 13 hours, and they were on top of it. They told people to get in the basement. We had a tornado in Mullica Hill, New Jersey. That was a wedge tornado. It was massive. It ripped apart an entire neighborhood where, you know, one house you couldn't even see. It was demolished to the ground. God, there it is. Right? So we're not used to seeing those tornadoes. We're used to those little rain-wrapped tornadoes, maybe an EF0, an EF1 every once in a while. But let's talk about Philadelphia. We had 16 tornado warnings yesterday. That makes 51 tornado warnings for this season. That is a record. So we are looking at records, especially with Ida. Again, from the beginning, it was a record. It was a Category 4 storm. It made landfall at 150 miles per hour. It stayed a Cat 2 storm well inland because of that brown water effect. And then it went to Tennessee, dropped all that rain on a place where it had 17 inches to begin with. And then, as we said, it was going to move into the mid-Atlantic and it was going to drop a lot of rain. So, Allison, this is a tough situation. These are really hard images. It is sad. It is, you know, and I think I said this before. I think the meteorology students are going to have to learn they're going to have to learn the psychology of storms because they're different, and they're different in the Northeast. I've lived here my entire life, decades upon decades upon decades, and I haven't seen things like this before. So I'm learning as well. But I do believe we have more housing, we have more concrete, we have more asphalt, and of course we have the correlation to climate change. So there's a lot to this, Allison.
Michelle, I'm so glad that you brought up all these important points because it's just the nuances make such a difference, right? I think that I even just think back to, gosh, what was it, 2 weeks ago now, Henri, and the conversations that you and I not only had on air, but on the side, I called you because you hear the words tropical storm, hurricane, and our brains automatically think this could be really bad. We need to do something. I was getting flash flood warnings on my phone yesterday, and we knew the rain was coming, but I was more surprised than I was when we were preparing for the hurricane. And on top of that, I had more flooding and more damage at my home this week than I did during that potential storm. And I think you bring up such an important point of the way that we think about, well, this is layered on top of what Henri brought, and this is layered on top of that rain. Yep. And we just kind of didn't process it that way, even though, as you said, you use the word dire. We know what that means.
Yeah, but you know what? That's a really good point. I'm glad you bring that up, too, because I think as human beings, we like to label things. We hear hurricane and we're like, we know it's going to be bad. It doesn't necessarily mean that. I think that we tend to do that. And we also tend to not heed warnings. I do think, again, working at our NBC Philadelphia station today, I think, especially in that neighborhood, they heeded the warnings because there would have been deaths there. After you saw what happened there, I think they heeded the warning. They went down to the basement. The National Weather Service, they're using verbiage I've never heard before. You know, so I think that we are growing with this. And I mean, I do appreciate this conversation because it's a tough one. It's a tough one, especially where you hear about fatalities, you hear about young children, and it's hard. It's really, really hard. But I do think there's so many more factors.
Yeah, Michelle, a great conversation. We're going to keep talking in the next hour. And you bring up a great point. A lot of people were warned and left. We just had Yasmin Vasugian in Mamaroneck, where they were knocking on doors telling people, we need your information. There might be a big problem here. So a lot of people did heed your warnings. Michelle, we'll definitely talk to you a little bit later. And thanks for all your hard work throughout all of these storms this season. I know it's been a tough one.
Oh, yeah. Thanks so much.
Some small signs of progress today in New Orleans. Power is slowly coming back. We've got team coverage of the recovery there. NBC News reporter Vaughn Hilliard's at a restaurant in the heart of New Orleans where the owner is feeding thousands of people. But we're going to start with NBC News correspondent Shaq Brewster. He's in the New Orleans neighborhood of Little Woods. So, Shaq, how are they doing bringing the power back there? Does some folks have some lights and some air conditioning?
Yeah, but it's slow moving, Allison. About 15% of folks have had their power restored, which means you still have about 700,000 people in the dark today, 4 days after this storm. We just checked the weather, and when you combine the heat and humidity, you're talking about temperatures that feel like it's 109 degrees. And the reason why I'm here right now, you mentioned, are some people getting their power back? Well, I'll tell you, it's happening unevenly across the city. On this side of the canal here, you see them there. They have power. They have AC. They're able to host people in their house who don't have power. On this side of the canal, they're still without power. You still hear those generators humming. Some of them are still evacuated away from there. I want you to listen to what folks on both sides of the street have told me.
I have family staying now because I have power, because lots of parts of the city don't have power.
Right, so you're the place people are coming to as everyone else is?
Yes, both houses are full.
Everybody, you know, just waiting on their turn, right? And if like my brother, if he has to go to work before his power comes on, he can just come here.
While you're still dealing with the generator, your neighbors right across the canal there, they have power. How does that make you feel?
It gives me a sense of hope. I feel like it's coming. It should be on the way. It's all around me. Hasn't got to me yet, but hopefully it'll be here.
You know, something else that gives people a sense of hope is how hard you see utility workers trying to restore the power, working to try to restore that power. You know, we heard that more than 25,000 utility workers from 38 different states across the country are here in Louisiana trying to restore that power as quickly as possible. But when you listen to utility companies and when you listen to local elected leaders, they're still warning folks that some people may not have their power restored for about 3 weeks. So people are going to be going through this tough situation for a little bit of time, Allison.
Shaq, it's not just power. We know gas is a big issue there, too. President Biden telling the Department of Energy, use the strategic petroleum reserves to get gas flowing if you need to. What else is the White House doing to help?
Well, first, it's important to remind folks that President Biden will be here in Louisiana tomorrow. He's making that trip here. He's expected to survey some damage. We don't know his exact schedule. But in addition to that, the White House has been highlighting different measures that they've been taking, sending generators to specific areas that need it the most, they say. They're also providing cash assistance. You also know about the FEMA presence that is here. They're trying to highlight and trying to help as much as they can to restore that power. I want you to listen to what we heard from the president earlier today about the recovery efforts and what they're doing at the federal level.
I directed the Department of Transportation to renew an energy declaration to provide flexibility on how many hours a truck driver can drive. Most people don't know there's a limitation on the number of hours you can be on the road. The Transportation Department is broadening that emergency declaration to include transportation of gasoline and other types of fuel as well.
I'll tell you, when the president comes tomorrow for that tour, there are plenty of places that he can still visit where you'll still see that damage and still have people without power. Allison.
For sure. All right, Jack, thanks so much for your coverage. Let's go over to NBC News reporter Vaughn Hilliard. He's outside the Howlin' Wolf in New Orleans. Vaughn, the storm is making it really tough for people to find food, and then on top of it, to keep what they have from spoiling. So I understand the owner there is running a free cookout, or that's what it looks like behind you. How's it going?
Of this particular restaurant, and it's also a music venue, but also has teamed up with more than 50 restaurant owners and chefs and other community members to essentially serve thousands a day. Yesterday, 2,500, more than 3,000 here today. I want to let you take a look at just the scene here. Throughout these last hours, folks have been coming up to get, some of the top meat that you'll find in town here, because they had to unload their kitchens here of perishable foods in order to be able to serve this community members. And frankly, Allison, I don't know where the federal government is here, because this is day number 4, day number 5 here, and it is these community members that have been serving their community members. When you go for blocks, there's no access to water or to food here except here on this block. I want to introduce you to Erica, who is one of the ringleaders here. Erica, can you tell me who you're with here and how you became involved and how this started up here just a couple days ago?
Absolutely. So I run Culture Aid NOLA, which is New Orleans' only no-barrier food distribution. And what you're kind of seeing here right now is just this incredible confluence of chefs and volunteers and community members and musicians and just everyone who really cares about keeping each other alive and supported. You know, no one can help New Orleans like New Orleans, and unfortunately, we're really used to being our own first responders.
I was walking around and I don't see many in the federal government in the greater area here. But for you guys have taken it upon yourselves here. Who are you seeing walk up here and looking for food? I was talking to one mom who told me, and she had her 3 kids, so we haven't had any warm food in 6 days. Who are you seeing here?
We're seeing a lot of people. I think, the hurricane was just a great equalizer. Even people who were safe a few weeks ago just lost everything in their kitchen. And our mission is kind of just really to serve everyone. In New Orleans, food is absolutely loved. Food is how we show community. And so we're out here cooking, honestly, some of the best food I've ever eaten and trying to serve it to each other with respect, and that's what it's about.
Erica, it's awesome. We found you because we were driving around blocks here of empty, quiet New Orleans streets. And Allison, it's people like Erica here. They've got the music going. It feels a little bit like old New Orleans here.
It's a party over here.
It is a party. It's a good atmosphere, good energy, and we're welcoming, and we appreciate you guys welcoming us in here.
Thank you.
And what is a very difficult time is still hundreds of thousands of individuals here around these blocks are still without power, without warm water, and their own food storage inside of their own kitchens is ever dwindling here. Allison?
Vaughn, even when they have so little, folks in New Orleans always have great energy, great food, great music. They just never give up. That community blows me away. Thank you so much for showing us what they're doing.
Thanks, my friend.
All right, let's go to NBC News Digital reporter Maya Eaglin. She's got the latest headlines from NBCNews.com. Hey, Maya.
Hey, Allison. A new FEMA policy is being put to the test as homeowners race to clean up after Hurricane Ida. Usually, the agency requires legal documentation to prove home ownership before sending disaster aid to applicants. But the rule faced scrutiny for disproportionately impacting Black families in the South who inherited property without records like deeds or wills. Now, applicants can prove they own their home in other ways, like showing receipts from major repairs or improvements. Operation Soccer Balls is underway. The international rescue mission is working to evacuate members of the Afghanistan national girls soccer team, along with their families, to the U.S. Most of the group was safely relocated to Australia last week, but 133 people are still trapped in Kabul, including 26 team members. Officials say there have been at least 5 failed attempts in recent days. Chinese officials giving the U.S. warning signs that the political tensions between Beijing and Washington could jeopardize a joint response to the climate crisis. The U.S. is hoping to keep climate talks separate from disputes over issues like trade and human rights, but Chinese leaders argue climate cooperation can't be addressed independently. The two countries are the world's leading sources of greenhouse gas emissions, so climate cooperation is vital. One of Germany's longest-serving leaders preparing to step down, 67-year-old Angela Merkel, has been Chancellor of Germany since 2005. She led the country through the 2008 global financial crisis and more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic. Merkel announced in 2018 that she wouldn't seek a fifth term. She'll be the first chancellor to leave power when she chooses. And a new vacation trend to tell you about, it's called trip stacking. Instead of booking just one big trip like an international destination or a cruise, people are booking smaller backup trips for the same time block that are less likely to get canceled due to changing pandemic restrictions. It also allows people to decide what they feel safest doing once their travel date gets closer. Allison, I don't know about you, but travel stacking sounds pretty interesting.
You had my attention and my ears perked up when you said travel stacking, because I'm just trying to think about planning one trip. Like, the thought of planning 3 or 4 on top of each other is overwhelming, but it is a very good idea, Maya. Thank you. Wildly popular and controversial podcast host Joe Rogan telling his millions of followers he has COVID and that he's taking ivermectin. It's a deworming drug that is not a proven coronavirus treatment. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson has the story.
Hey, Allison. Joe Rogan is a very controversial media personality. He is best known for his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, and he has been very vocal in the past about the COVID vaccine. Now, as he shares his experience with the coronavirus, he is stirring up even more controversy, talking about the drugs he took to get better.
He's been one of the loudest COVID vaccine skeptics.
It's a completely new kind of vaccine. The idea that people shouldn't be skeptical or nervous about that is kind of hilarious.
Now this morning, Joe Rogan, the mega popular podcaster and UFC commentator, says he tested positive for COVID.
I got fevers and sweats, and I knew what was going on.
Telling fans on Instagram he got back from taking his show on the road Saturday night. Reportedly, he was in Florida, where COVID cases are setting records. It's unclear whether the 54-year-old has been vaccinated. Rogan also sharing with his over 13 million followers that he's taking the drug ivermectin, meant to treat parasites and worms in horses and other animals.
We immediately threw the kitchen sink at it. All kinds of meds, monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin.
Despite being unproven as a COVID treatment and dangerous for humans in high doses, ivermectin has received a recent boost from online misinformation, prompting warnings from the FDA and other health officials. The FDA tweeting last month, "You are not a horse, you are not a cow. Serious, y'all, stop it." With millions of listeners and a $100 million licensing deal with Spotify, Rogan has influence, setting off a firestorm earlier this year, suggesting healthy younger people didn't need the vaccine.
If you're a healthy person and you're exercising all the time and you're young and you're eating well, I don't think you need to worry about this.
Savannah asked Dr. Anthony Fauci for his take on Rogan's comments.
Well, that's incorrect, Savannah.
Young, healthy people should get vaccinated.
Absolutely.
Vaccine proponent Prince Harry, who also has an exclusive deal with Spotify, took Rogan to task.
Stay out of it. If you have a platform, with a platform comes responsibility.
Rogan quickly responded to the backlash.
I'm not an anti-vax person. I'm not a doctor. I'm a moron. And I'm a cage fighting commentator. I'm not a respected source of information, even for me.
Now, doctors warn that people who take ivermectin can have a slew of ills, from nausea to vomiting, even death. Rogan thanked modern medicine for getting him well so quickly and says he's been feeling better every single day since Sunday. When NBC News reached out to Rogan to ask more questions about his treatment, he declined to comment.
It is time for the bottom line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. It's Thursday, so we're going to talk jobless claims. 340,000 Americans filing for first-time unemployment benefits last week. The best numbers we've seen since March of 2020. Another sign the economy's slowly working its way out of this pandemic. We're hoping to see even more job creation with federal unemployment benefits expiring and parents going back to work as their kids head back to school. And then tomorrow, we get the all-important August jobs report. We're looking for 720,000 new jobs for the month. That's according to Dow Jones, and for unemployment to drop to 5.2% from 5.4%. Her defense is unusual, even risky. So will it work? Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes on trial for fraud this week. Jury selection started on Tuesday. Her lawyers are expected to blame her co-defendant, Ramesh Balwani, the company's ex-president and COO. He's also Holmes' ex-boyfriend. MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalos here now to weigh that strategy. All right, so Danny, Holmes is claiming Balwani made her do bad things. You say that means she basically has to admit that those bad things happened. So walk us through what it looks like her defense team is going to argue here.
Sure. If she goes with the blame Balwani, and remember, Balwani is her co-defendant, but that trial's been severed. That was a major win for Holmes. So he won't be in the courtroom. So she has the luxury of pointing to the empty chair and saying, that's the guy who's really responsible. That's the guy who knew about all this stuff. He kept me in the dark. I had no idea. Blame him. But he's not here. Just don't blame me. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I was as bamboozled as everybody else. I, too, am a victim. That's going to be a theme if they go with the blame the co-defendant defense, which has been around for as long as there have been co-defendants. I mean, this is
not a new strategy.
New concept. Not at all. Not at all.
All right. So, Danny, I have to ask you about this, though. Back in 2016, here's what Holmes said on camera.
I'm the founder and CEO of this company. Anything that happens in this company is my responsibility at the end of the day, and I hold myself responsible for that.
Danny, can she have it both ways? It's her responsibility, it's her company, but Balwani made her do it. What about this might work, and what are the risks?
Yeah, as a defense attorney, you see clips like that, and you just go, oops, that's going to be a problem, especially when she gave so many interviews. And that's exactly the government, the prosecution, knows that. They're going to make the jury aware of that she essentially said the buck stops here. So how can she argue now that this vast company, I had no idea about the financials and whether or not the product or the technology was actually working? It's a long shot.
So, Danny, you call it a long shot, but you also call her legal strategy creative. But you said most defense strategies in federal criminal court are long shots. So what are her odds here?
Yeah, the federal government wins over 90% of its cases in federal court. The government likes to make its cases, and they stay made. They're very, very good at their job. And even Elizabeth Holmes has some of the best attorneys in the business. So let's say that doubles her odds from maybe 10% to 20%. Those are still not very good odds, no matter what. I mean, it's tough to win in federal court. So if you're just ballparking it, the vast majority of federal defendants become federal convictees, federal criminals, so to speak. So so the odds for any federal criminal defendant are not great. I mean, when I defend cases in federal court, it's a real bummer because, you have the whole weight of the U.S. government against you, and they have the benefit of these incredibly expansive laws that bring all kinds of conduct into the fold. So it is a tough place for anyone to be, including Elizabeth Holmes.
So, Danny, you said she's got really great defense attorneys, no doubt. You're a defense attorney, and we might be partial, but we'd argue you're great. Would you go this route? Would you try something else? What better options, if any, are on the table?
Oh, you have to be creative in federal criminal court. So, for example, I would expect her attorneys to probably blame Balwani and then also put Silicon Valley on trial. Say, look, this is not fraud. This is puffery. Everyone in Silicon Valley is full of beep. They're all puffing their company and saying it's the best. And my new product is the new app. It's the new thing. It's the latest. It's the greatest. This is what everyone does in Silicon Valley, and Elizabeth Holmes is no different. Also, not a bad strategy. The jury pool is going to be a lot of folks in that business. Now, will they sympathize with Holmes or look at her and say, wait a minute, we don't do what she does?
I'm so curious to see how they feel on that one, Danny, because you just don't know. They might go, yeah, we do it too, but they might go, oh, heck no, we don't. As you said, Danny Savalos, always great to see you. Hey, I'm in studio, and I'm looking forward to the day we can have you here again. I just want you to know I have my shoes on, but if you were here with us, I wouldn't.
Yes, of course, me too. Mine are off right now as we speak.
Thanks, Danny. A divided Supreme Court leaving Texas's abortion law in place in a 5-4 vote late Wednesday. The court declined to block the most restrictive abortion ban in the country. That new state law bans the procedure 6 weeks into pregnancy. NBCNews.com senior digital reporter Alex Seitzwald is looking at the impact this latest decision could have on abortion rights nationwide. But first, NBC News senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson has more on the Supreme Court's groundbreaking decision.
Hey there, Allison. So the Supreme Court silent no more on this Texas abortion law, the most restrictive in the country. Opponents had wanted the justices to step in and block the law on an emergency basis. But overnight, the court, in this split 5-4 decision, said it would not do that, at least not right now. So what does the law do? It effectively bans abortions after a fetal heartbeat is found about 6 weeks into a pregnancy. That's before some women even realize they're pregnant. And it makes no exceptions for rape or incest. The law also tries to make it harder to challenge in court, right? Here's how. Instead of tasking state officials with enforcing it, it gives incentives for people to file private lawsuits against anyone who's considered to be helping with an abortion, even somebody who drives the patient to the clinic. At the court, you had the conservative justices in the majority arguing the plaintiffs had not addressed complex procedural questions, but they left the door open to challenges. Chief Justice John Roberts joined the 3 more liberal members of the court in dissenting, with Justice Sonia Sotomayor in a scathing opinion calling the order stunning and accusing her fellow justices of burying their heads in the sand.
President Biden saying today he'll launch a whole-of-government response to protect women's abortion rights. That new law in Texas could flip the script on abortion politics, with Democrats eyeing some gains here. NBC News senior digital politics reporter Alex Seitzwald joins me now. So, Alex, abortion used to divide Democrats, but you're saying that they're now seizing on this issue. How are Dems from Virginia to California using abortion rights to drive voters to the polls ahead of the midterm elections?
Yeah, Allison, this is a consequence of that big political realignment that really accelerated under Donald Trump, where the two parties kind of swapped voters. Democrats got wiped out among rural, white, working-class voters who tend to oppose abortion, but they made a lot of gains in the suburbs with more college-educated voters who tend to be more liberal on social issues. So you used to have these conservative Democrats like Bart Stupak in Congress who threatened to hold up the Affordable Care Act over abortion. Now you could count the number of anti-abortion Democrats in Congress on one hand, if that. So in the 2 most important races that are happening right now in Virginia and California, if the Supreme Court does overturn Roe, it's going to go to the states. And Democrats are really putting that front and center. Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat in Virginia, was already running TV ads on abortion even before the court allowed the Texas law to go into effect. And in California, Gavin Newsom, the governor who's hoping to survive a recall, he's warning that if he loses, California, this liberal bastion, could see a rollback of abortion rights.
So let's talk more about the Republicans here, Alex. A poli-sci professor at the University of Denver told you that the new politics over abortion could be more dangerous for Republicans, that the safe space the GOP's had for years is gone. What's changed specifically for them?
It's a bit of a dog that caught the car kind of situation.
Okay.
This was always a great issue for Republicans to campaign on. It would motivate their base, and they didn't have to worry too much about provoking an equal and opposite reaction in provoking Democrats, because no one really believed that Roe v. Wade was going to go anywhere. And then you had moderates like Susan Collins, who had to win in Maine, a more moderate, more Democratic-friendly area. She could say things like, well, abortion is settled law, so it doesn't really matter because, this is not an issue that's actually going to come up. But now this thing that they've been campaigning on could actually happen, and you're seeing a lot of Democrats and a lot of independents who do support abortion rights getting very motivated about it. And, the polls, the public opinion is not on Republican side overall here. There was just an NBC News poll that showed 54% of Americans support abortion rights in general. So it was something that was good when they could just talk to their base about it. But now that there's actual stakes, actual consequences, it could backfire on Republicans.
So you mentioned suburban voters before. How much power do they have here?
They're huge. I mean, this is really going to be where the midterms are decided. It's how Democrats won their majority in 2018, and it's where they could lose it. And it's why you see Republicans like Larry Elder, who's running for governor in California next month. He's a talk radio host. He's a guy who has never been afraid to push a hot button. I asked him yesterday at a press conference about abortion, and he just did not want to touch it at all. He said, that's not the reason I'm running. It's not going to matter. In Virginia, the other big race that's happening this year, Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, he was asked about it yesterday. He doesn't want to talk about it either because Republicans know that these suburban voters are not with them on abortion, so they just don't really want to talk about it if you have to face voters in a more moderate swing area.
Alex, we always love talking politics with you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
She's not just on the January 6th Select Committee. Congresswoman Liz Cheney is now its vice chair. Democratic Chairman Benny Thompson making the announcement today, while Cheney's fellow Republicans want her removed from the House GOP conference. Here's NBC News national political reporter Sahil Kapoor.
A new development today with the January 6th Select Committee as Democratic Chairman Benny Thompson appoints Liz Cheney, the Wyoming Republican, as vice chair of that committee that is tasked with getting to the bottom of what happened on January 6th in that attack on the Capitol. This move is a show of confidence from Democrats into Liz Cheney's position on that committee, elevating her in part in an effort to convey that this committee is nonpartisan, that it is devoid of politics, and putting a prominent Republican in a position like that is shows a desire that they want the American public to be able to trust its findings at the end of the day. Now, Liz Cheney has accepted this position, and she has thanked the Democrats for putting her in that role. This comes as some of her Republican colleagues, led by Andy Biggs, have written a letter to Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, calling on him to change the rules to remove her, as well as Congressman Adam Kinzinger, the other Republican on this panel, from the House Republican Conference. Liz Cheney appears undeterred in her position on the committee and her determination to continue the work of that, saying in a statement, quote, "We will not be deterred by threats or attempted obstruction, and we will not rest until our task is complete," unquote. Makes clear here that the work of this committee is going to continue even as Liz Cheney is at loggerheads with Democrats on other ideological issues, such as a $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, even as she is one of President Biden's biggest critics on the issue of Afghanistan and the withdrawal of American troops from there. They want this committee to be above politics. That is what Democrats are trying to convey as they elevate Liz Cheney to the second-ranked position here. Allison?
Broadway is back. Nearly 18 months after the lights dim, the Great White Way is shining once again. NBC News Now anchor Joe Fryer checks out some of the top shows taking the stage again.
Hey, Allison. First, Bruce Springsteen brought his show back to Broadway in June. Then last month, the play Passover hit the stage. Well, now in September, 15 shows plan to start performances again. 2 of them raise the curtain tonight. Waitress, starring Sarah Bareilles, and Hadestown, the last show to win a Tony for Best Musical. Tonight marks the return of Hadestown, a musical that takes its audience to the underworld.
Why is it so hot down
Never
here?
has such a hellish journey been more welcome.
So when you found out Broadway was coming back, what was the first thing you thought?
Of course, just thrilled, because that meant that not only me, but the people I cared about would have a job again.
Eva Noblezada is once again Eurydice, same role she was playing in March of 2020 when Broadway suddenly went dark.
I mean, it looks beautiful.
During the pandemic, she hunkered down with Reeve Carney, her co-star on stage and partner off.
What went through your mind when you would see just Broadway quiet, the marquees dark?
Did you get a chance to see that?
Yeah.
We were like, what the heck is going on?
So what got you through?
Oh, God. Hope and a full glass of gin. The remembrance of how fulfilling theater is and being surrounded by theaters, I went, I must be here for a reason.
That reason? A different kind of Broadway revival. In recent weeks, productions have been reuniting and rehearsing. From the cast of Waitress starring Sarah Bareilles to The Music Man with Hugh Jackman. This month, Hamilton, The Lion King, and Wicked are all slated to hit the stage, along with Moulin Rouge, the musical. Star Aaron Tveit says his show now has a new energy.
Feels like we're putting on kind of the Broadway 2.0 production of Moulin Rouge.
I mean, do you see this show in sort of a different light after everything we've gone through?
This show at its core is about a group of artists kind of fighting for the opportunity to practice their art and share their art.
Now all these casts will finally share their art for crowds that must bring a mask and proof of vaccination. Broadway's reopening act.
to hear that group of people laugh or cry or celebrate, getting goosebumps thinking about it. Yeah, it's just, it's like nothing else.
One lingering question, will worries over the Delta variant keep some Broadway fans away? In the coming weeks, you actually can find some availability, a little bit for shows that were really in demand before the pandemic, but that's not super common. Overall, the Broadway League says September ticket sales are strong.
Broadway, hosted by Joe Fryer, Monday at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on NBC News Now.